Okay, so are you ready to dive in? Today, we're going deep, really deep into Genesis 6.
Genesis 6, yeah.
No, the ark, the flood, the whole shebang.
The whole 9 yards.
But we're going deeper than the Sunday school version here.
Okay.
We're looking at the nuances, the controversies, and what this ancient text might still be trying to tell us,
Yeah.
all these centuries later.
Right.
So what always gets me about this chapter
Oh, yeah.
is how it just drops this monumental event on us with this seemingly simple statement.
Okay.
The wickedness of man was great in the earth.
It's like the quiet before the storm, right?
Yeah.
It's like, the tension is just building.
Yeah, and you've probably already noticed that the text doesn't really tell us exactly what made everyone so wicked.
That's right.
It's almost like it's making us ask ourselves,
Right.
what do we think?
Yeah.
Like, what does wickedness even mean?
Yeah, for me, it highlights this idea
Okay.
that evil isn't always about, like a checklist of bad deeds.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
It's more about a state of being, like a turning away from
Right.
what's good, what's right.
Yeah, like a disconnect from your moral compass.
Totally.
Yeah. And that's where things start to get really interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're introduced to these sons of God
Mm-hmm.
who take wives for themselves of all whom they chose.
Right.
So who are these sons of God?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, some scholars look at that phrase and they see angelic beings,
Okay.
and that makes sense when you think about other ancient beliefs about divine offspring.
Okay.
But you could also read it as Seth's line,
Right, the righteous son.
but Adam and
Eve.
Eve's. That's right. And if it's Seth's line, then that raises all sorts of questions about inherited sin
Okay.
and whether righteousness can really be passed down through generations.
Okay, so we're already getting into some pretty
Yeah.
heavy stuff here.
Yep.
The nature of good and evil, inherited sin, concepts that are still very much with us today.
Absolutely.
And then we've got these giants that are born from these unions,
Yeah.
mighty men who were of old men of renown.
Right.
I mean, that captures the imagination, right?
It does.
And it connects to all these other myths and legends
Yeah.
about giants. It does make you wonder if there could be
Mm-hmm.
some kernel of truth to these tales.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember
Yeah.
that those giants, those mighty men,
Yeah.
they're not portrayed in a good light at all.
Yeah.
They represent this growing corruption and violence
Okay.
that's engulfing humanity.
So this growing wickedness represented by these powerful giants,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't going unnoticed, right?
No, definitely not.
We see God reacting, and not just with like anger or disappointment.
Right.
The text actually says that God was sorry that he had made man on the earth,
Right.
and he was grieved in his heart.
I mean, that's heavy stuff.
Yeah. So hold on, if God knew that humans were going to be flawed
Right.
right from the start,
Mm-hmm.
why all this grief?
You're hitting on something really important there.
Okay.
It challenges the idea that God is this distant, unfeeling,
Okay.
being that we see in a lot of ancient mythology.
Right, right.
What we see here is a God who cares deeply about humanity,
Okay.
who feels sorrow and regret.
Okay.
And that raises all sorts of questions for us.
Yeah, like what is God's role in creation?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Was it a mistake?
Right.
And what does it mean for us?
Right.
Knowing that we were created by a God who's capable of such powerful emotions.
So you're saying we should be looking at this
Mhm.
less as like a historical account
Right.
and more as a way to understand God's relationship
It's
with humanity.
It's about exploring the emotional landscape,
Okay.
that relationship, the complexity,
And nuances.
the nuances that go way beyond this simple idea of
Yeah.
creation and punishment.
Yeah. And this all leads us to this pivotal moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where God, heartbroken by what humanity has become, decides to bring a flood
Right.
to cleanse the earth.
A reset button.
Basically, yeah. Hitting the reset button
Yeah.
on creation, pretty drastic measure.
It is.
Really raises questions about divine justice, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it does.
But amidst all this talk of wickedness and judgment,
Mm-hmm.
we have this glimmer of hope,
Yeah.
Noah.
Hmm.
What stands out to you about Noah in the context of all this chaos?
Well, for me, Noah represents the possibility of redemption.
Okay.
The idea that even when everyone else is turning away from God, there's still individuals
Okay.
who remain faithful.
He's described as a just man, perfect in his generations,
Mm-hmm.
someone who walked with God.
Right.
Well, what does perfect in his generations even mean?
Yeah.
Is that like literal perfection?
Well, I don't think so, because
Okay.
we're dealing with a text that emphasizes human flaws.
Right.
I think perfect in this context is more about being aligned with God's will.
Being willing to listen and obey.
So Noah embodies this idea of obedience and faith,
Right.
which leads to him being chosen for this monumental task,
Yeah.
building the ark.
Building the ark.
And we can't just skip over the fact that this was no ordinary boat.
No, it wasn't.
This thing was massive.
It was.
The text gives us the dimensions: 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide,
Wow.
30 cubits high. I mean, just try to picture that.
It's hard to wrap your head around it.
Longer than a football field, wider than a basketball court,
It's huge.
and as tall as a 6-story building.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the numbers,
Yeah,
but the ark is so much more than just a big boat.
right.
It's a symbol, a powerful metaphor.
Okay, so let's unpack that symbolism then.
Go ahead.
What do you see as the key metaphorical meanings behind the ark?
Right.
I'm struck by how the ark is both a refuge
Yeah,
and a prison.
that's a great observation.
What do you make of that tension?
Well, on the one hand, it's a sanctuary,
Okay.
right? A safe haven for Noah, his family,
The animals.
for protecting them from
Yeah.
the floodwaters.
It speaks to this idea of preservation,
Okay.
hope amidst chaos.
But on the other hand, it's this confined space,
Right.
a floating prison
Yeah.
that cuts them off from the world.
Exactly. They once knew.
And that speaks to isolation,
Right.
to being set apart.
It's like being caught between the destruction of the old world and the uncertainty of a new beginning.
Yeah, and I think that tension is something we can all relate to.
On some level.
On some level, yeah.
Okay, but before we get too deep into the symbolism of the ark,
Okay.
let's talk about the logistics of fitting all those animals on this massive vessel.
Right.
How did Noah even round up 2 of every kind of animal on Earth?
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a question that's puzzled people for centuries.
Yeah.
The text simply says that 2 of every kind came to Noah.
Right.
But how?
Yeah, how did that actually happen?
Did God supernaturally guide them? Did Noah selectively gather animals from his region?
Okay.
I mean, we're left to wonder.
Yeah, it's like the story is inviting us to use our imagination
Absolutely.
and think about
It's
the
a-
practicalities
The practical implication.
of such a monumental task.
It's imagine being there.
Yeah.
The sounds, the smells, the constant activity
Right.
inside that ark.
It must have been an incredible cacophony.
There must have been.
But it wasn't just about physical survival.
Oh.
It was about preserving the genetic diversity
Of creation.
of creation,
Yeah.
ensuring that life could flourish again
Right.
after the flood.
And it makes you wonder
Yeah.
about our own responsibility to protect biodiversity today.
So we're already drawing connections between this ancient text and the challenges we face
Right.
in the
Yes.
modern world.
Absolutely.
It's like this story is a bridge across time,
Yeah.
prompting us to think about our own relationship with nature, with each other, and with the divine.
It really is a timeless story.
Yeah.
It continues to resonate, to challenge us, and to invite us to dive deeper
Deeper into its layers of meaning.
into its layers of meaning.
All right, well, let's keep diving then.
Let's do it.
You know, it's easy to get caught up in the, how did they do that?
Right.
Like, how did Noah build this massive ark and
Right.
and take care of all those animals?
Yeah.
But like you were saying, the ark is more than just a big boat.
Oh, it's so much more.
It's a symbol.
A powerful symbol with so many layers of meaning.
Right.
And one of those layers that I find most fascinating
Okay.
is the idea of the ark as like a microcosm
Okay.
of creation itself.
Okay.
You've got all these different species crammed together
Right.
in this confined space, all dependent on Noah
Okay.
and his family for their survival.
So it's not just about saving the animals.
No.
It's about this interconnectedness
Yeah.
of all living things.
That's exactly it.
And that raises some questions for us today, doesn't it?
It does.
Like, do we see ourselves as part of that interconnected web of life?
Mm-hmm.
Are we actually taking responsibility for the well-being
Right.
of other species, for the health of the planet?
Those are big questions.
Or are we acting more like that generation before the flood, just focused on our own needs,
yeah.
oblivious to the consequences?
That's a bit of a scary parallel, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, you're right. It does make you think.
Mm-hmm.
So if the ark represents this
Yeah.
chance for a new beginning,
Mm-hmm.
a fresh start for humanity,
Right.
what lessons can we take from that?
What kind of ark are we building for the future?
Oh, I like that. What kind of ark are we building for the future?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing that we're all connected. We can't just build walls and pretend
Right.
that the problems of the world aren't going to affect us.
Right.
The story of the ark
Yeah.
reminds us that we have a responsibility to care for creation,
Okay.
to act with compassion and justice,
Okay.
to build a world that's sustainable and equitable for all.
Okay, but let's be real for a second.
Okay.
We're not going to literally build a giant wooden boat
No.
and sail off with a bunch of animals.
Right.
So what does building an ark look like in the 21st century?
I think it's about creating spaces,
Okay.
both physical and metaphorical,
Okay.
where we can preserve what's precious.
Right.
We
Yes.
can nurture hope and possibility.
Right.
It's about working for social justice, environmental sustainability, peace, and reconciliation.
So it's about taking those symbolic meanings
Yeah.
of the ark preservation,
Hope.
a new beginning,
Right.
and turning them into action
Exactly. Making them real.
in the real world. I like that. It's a call to action.
It is.
But it's also a call to introspection.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what kind of ark are we building in our own lives, in our communities, in our world?
The world.
But before we go too far down that road,
Sure.
let's get back to the story.
All right.
So after the floodwaters recede,
Mm-hmm.
Noah sends out a dove. And what does that dove bring back?
An olive branch.
An olive branch.
A sign of peace
Right.
and renewal.
What a perfect symbol.
It really is.
Right?
After all that destruction and chaos,
Yeah.
this tiny little sign of life,
Of hope.
of hope.
Yeah, and it's followed by this covenant between God and Noah.
Right.
This promise that never again will humanity be destroyed by a flood.
That God will never again
Right.
destroy the world by flood.
It's like a rainbow after the storm, right?
It is.
A sign of hope, a commitment to a better future.
Yeah.
But if we're really being honest with ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
we can't just gloss over that covenant.
Okay.
What does it tell us about God's character,
About forgiveness.
about forgiveness?
Well, I think it highlights the idea that God's love and mercy are boundless,
Okay.
even in the face of human failure.
Right. But let's be honest.
Yeah.
Humanity hasn't exactly lived up to its end
No, we haven't.
of the bargain.
Right.
We've seen a lot of destruction and violence since the time of Noah.
Absolutely we have. But I don't think this story
Right.
is meant to be a fairy tale
Right.
with a happy ending.
Right.
It's more of a reminder
Okay.
that we have a choice to make
Okay.
in every generation.
Okay.
Do we repeat the mistakes of the past,
Mm-hmm.
or do we learn from them and try to create a better future?
So are we building our own arcs?
Yeah.
Are we working towards that better future?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we headed towards another flood?
That's a sobering thought, isn't it?
It really is.
But it's also empowering
Okay.
because we have the capacity for both.
Okay.
We can create or we can destroy.
Right.
And the story of Noah reminds us that we have that power to choose.
So with that in mind,
Okay.
let's shift gears a bit and explore how this story, this ancient myth,
Mm-hmm.
has resonated throughout history.
Yeah.
How it's been interpreted and reinterpreted
Right.
in art, literature, even
Yeah.
popular culture. Because, I mean, let's face it, this isn't just a story for theologians and legal scholars.
Absolutely not.
It's a story that's captivated people
Mm-hmm.
for millennia.
And for good reason.
Yeah.
It speaks to these universal themes of hope
Right.
and despair, judgment, redemption,
Hmm.
the power of faith,
Yeah, it's a story that continues to challenge us,
and inspire us.
inspire us, and remind us how fragile
Yeah.
our existence really is.
How fragile everything is.
From Renaissance paintings to Hollywood blockbusters,
Mm-hmm.
the image of the ark has become this icon,
Right.
this symbol of survival,
Mhm.
of resilience, of overcoming challenges.
Absolutely.
But I think what's really fascinating is how different cultures and different individuals
Sure.
have interpreted this story in their own unique ways.
Yeah, it's like this text is a prism
Uh-huh.
reflecting different meanings
Right, okay.
depending on who's looking at it.
Yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of story.
Not at all.
So we've talked about the symbolism of the ark,
Mm-hmm.
the covenant, the dove, the olive branch.
Right.
But let's not forget about Noah himself.
Yeah.
What can we learn from this just man
Yeah.
who walked with God?
Yeah. What made him different?
Yeah, what set him apart?
I think it comes down to his faith
Okay.
and obedience.
Okay.
He trusted God even when it didn't make sense.
Right.
He didn't question. He didn't doubt.
Okay.
He just acted.
And that act of faith, that willingness to follow God's guidance, ultimately saved him and his family.
Right.
It's a powerful reminder that even when things seem impossible, faith can be a source of strength.
Of resilience.
But it's not just about blind faith, is it?
No.
It's about aligning our actions with our beliefs.
About living a life that's just and compassionate.
And that's a message that resonates across time and cultures. It's a call to live a life of purpose, a life that matters, a life that makes a difference.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Genesis 6, let's bring it back to you, the listener.
Okay.
What resonates with you about this story?
Yeah.
What challenges you?
What parts speak to you?
What inspires you? Because that's what makes these ancient texts so powerful.
Absolutely.
They're not just stories from the past.
Yeah.
They're stories that still speak to us in the present. They invite us to engage with them, to grapple with their meaning, and to find our own personal connection to them.
I think that's a great place to leave it.
Yeah. You know, it's really something how this story can still make us think so deeply.
It is powerful.
About ourselves and the world around us.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground.
Yeah.
In our deep dive into Genesis 6.
Yeah.
From good and evil to the ark to even like our own responsibility for the planet.
Absolutely.
And what I find so fascinating is that even though this story is ancient, it's still relevant today.
Oh, it's incredibly relevant.
It asks these questions about how we respond to warnings,
Right.
how we get ready for the unexpected, and how we deal with the consequences of our actions.
Yeah, it's like it's holding up a mirror to us.
Yeah.
Reflecting back our own anxieties and hopes.
We see things like climate change, political turmoil, social unrest.
It can feel overwhelming.
Yeah, it can feel like the world is spinning out of control. Do you think that's why this idea of a fresh start, a reset button?
It's appealing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's appealing.
The idea of wiping the slate clean and starting over.
Right.
Especially when things feel so chaotic.
But the story also reminds us that even after a flood, human nature doesn't magically change.
No, it doesn't. We're still capable of the same mistakes.
So it's not like we just wait around for a divine rescue.
Right. We have to be
active building the arcs.
For our own time.
For our own time.
Exactly.
And those arcs might take many different forms.
Yeah, they could be community initiatives.
Right.
To fight climate change organizations, fighting for social justice.
Okay.
Even just individual acts of kindness and compassion.
So it's about taking action.
Absolutely.
Creating positive change.
Yeah, the story is a challenge.
Okay.
It asks us, what kind of world do we want to create?
What are we willing to do?
What are we willing to do?
To make that happen.
To make it a reality.
And I think that's why this story has inspired so much art and literature.
Oh, yeah.
Over the centuries.
Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling.
Yeah.
Countless films and novels.
The ark is this enduring symbol.
It is a symbol of hope.
Of hope.
And resilience.
And it's interesting how artists and writers
have interpreted it in so many different ways.
Yeah. Some focus on the terror and destruction of the flood, highlighting the consequences of wickedness. While all of others
emphasize the hope.
The hope.
The renewal.
Right. And it shows how a story can have these multiple layers of meaning.
Yeah.
It all depends on who's looking at it.
It really does.
And maybe that's the most important takeaway from all this.
Okay.
Genesis 6 isn't just some historical account or a simple moral lesson.
It's more than that.
It's this invitation to grapple with big questions.
About faith.
About faith.
About humanity.
Humanity, our relationship with God.
It's a challenge to think critically.
Right.
To explore different perspectives.
To find your own meaning.
To find your own connection to this ancient text.
Well said.
Thank you.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this final thought.
Okay.
Imagine you're living back in Noah's time. You see all this wickedness. You hear the warnings of what's coming.
Yeah.
What do you do?
That's a good question.
Do you ignore it all?
Really?
Do you dismiss it as just a myth?
Or do you start building an ark?
Do you prepare?
Do you prepare for the unknown?
Do you have hope for a better future?
Yeah. That's the choice we all face.
In every generation.
In every generation.
It's a question that stays with you.
It does.
Long after the story is over.
Yeah.
It makes us examine our own values.
Our own choice.
Our own choices.
Yeah.
Our own role in shaping the world around us.
Well said.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Into Genesis 6, may this ancient story inspire you to think deeply, to
Yeah.
act courageously,
To build arcs of hope.
to build arcs of hope in a world
Yeah.
that desperately needs them.
They needs them.